What do you think is the most credible conspiracy theory? People are abducted without warning when they try to mention the. It is scary when you see, deleted, in this thread, that Hodder is secretly conspiring to seize the Iron Throne. Unless they are blind or have very poor vision, everybody can see why kids love the taste of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. The idea that uncool adults can't see why kids love the taste is a clever advertising program to make kids feel special and buy more cereal. That food companies screw jar lids on really tight, so that women can't open them, therefore needing a man for that to ultimately uphold and maintain a patriarchal society. That the government is monitoring all of our electronic communications. I just have this feeling that companies making consumer electronics deliberately make their products inferior and subject to decay over time so people are forced to buy updates to technology they made it in the first place. Is it still a conspiracy theory if it's been proven? The CIA has definitely been involved with smuggling drugs into the USA at some points in the past. Mostly definitely in the 1980s through Nicaragua. None of the details, such as how much direct involvement the CIA had, are very clear, but there's no question they knew what was going on and in some way profited from it. The government still controls major media outlets trying to make Americans think however they wish them to think. Operation Mockingbird is still in full effect. Most recently, the US and UK governments doing their utmost to destabilize Syria, supporting groups that are more or less Al-Qaeda aligned. That's apparently a-okay now. The UK taking the abusive husband approach to Snowden and The Guardian by leaking material to The Independent and attributing it to Snowden. See, holding up bloody fists. Look what you made me do to myself. It's both disturbing in the obviousness and that the mainstream media just doesn't report on it. Actual hard questions are seldom asked of world leaders or governments these days from fear of losing press access. We seem to be heading down a dark path quite quickly. I guess it kind of stopped being a conspiracy theory when the documents were unclassified in 2008 and went from being a conspiracy to being fact. But Nixon did something way worse at the Watergate scandal. Right before the 1968 election, LBJ was about to get peace negotiated between North and South Vietnam. And if he did that, his Democratic successor, Hubert Humphrey, would have a good chance of winning. So Nixon used his senior campaign advisor to meet with the South Vietnamese ambassador in Nixon's apartment and get them to stop the peace talks because Nixon could get them a better deal once he was president. The peace talks went to it. LBJ and Democrats appeared weak and incompetent. Nixon won the election, and Vietnam went on fighting for another 7 years. It's sad because LBJ actually knew it was happening, because the FBI bugged the phone of the South Vietnamese ambassador. However, he could not reveal that he knew Nixon was sabotaging the peace talks without revealing they were bugging the phones, which LBJ thought would be even more damaging than if Nixon was elected. So he didn't reveal it. Listen to the second recording especially. That's LBJ telling a friend that he caught Nixon telling the South Vietnamese to hold off on the peace talks until he was elected. Edit. LBJ was not running to be re-elected. It was actually Hubert Humphrey that was running on the Democratic ticket. That JFK was set up when he was assassinated. Granted, this isn't anything new, but it just seems so obvious. 1. We find in a movie theater Lee Harvey Oswald in a matter of hours after he shot the president while unseen. Finding a murderer within 2 days is considered great police work by today's standards. 2. Then someone sneaks into a police station full of men with a gun and shoots Oswald while he's in custody. How does that happen? Then everything is swept under the rug and we're to assume that Oswald was alone when he killed JFK? I think not. Michael Jackson was a black man. His children all had blonde hair and pale skin. You do the math. The government has a special program which crawls through the internet, removing the commas from and rearranging the grammar on all conspiracy theory sites that get a little too close to the truth. The belief that Yuri Gagarin wasn't the first man in space. There's apparently audio evidence of others screaming on how they will never be remembered and then silence. It seems plausible that the Russians, so intent on beating the US in the arms race, would accidentally kill men trying to achieve it. The proliferation of bacon-related memes and Facebook posts was originally orchestrated as a viral campaign by an advertising agency hired by the trade group representing pork producers to offset bad press related to animal welfare on factory hog farms. Aliens have visited in the past whilst traveling the universe, and they inspired the stories of Greek gods, Hindu gods, etc. That David Stern secretly suspended Michael Jordan during his baseball break for gambling on basketball games. He saved the popularity of the face of the NBA while still punishing MJ. The exorbitantly wealthy conspiring to get wealthier. The war on Iraq and Afghanistan was to make money. All the big industrial war complex made billions while taxes payers lost billions, and not to bring freedom and democratize those places. High fructose corn syrup exists to make us fat, lazy and happy. The govt is in bed with big oil. They set the traffic light sequence to give you more red lights, making you waste petrol at intersections. Not really a conspiracy theory, but I'm almost certain that our government would intentionally cover up any known, imminent global catastrophe until the very last minute before disclosing facts to the public. The clock could be running out and we would be none the wiser. Rumors about products like Mountain Dew will shrink your balls, and soy milk will give men tits, are started by their competition, not just random idiots that decide to try and start up a chain email one day. All the members of the Bush administration knew the whole time that there was no decent evidence that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. They just really wanted to invade Iraq and depose him. Well, they admitted to Area 51 existing like a week ago, so I got nothing now. That a group of people in our conspirators start this thread every week so they can make fun of the conspirators. That Pope Benedicto's view was nothing but a scapegoat elevated to Pope to take the blame for the church's scandals and such. That Pope Francis was supposed to be Pope at the time of Benedict's appointment, but they knew he would eventually be forced out of the papacy because of the drama unfolding. Pope Benedict stepping down gives Francis the excuse he needs in the case of anything being discovered. HAARP is used to study ultra-long-wave communication with submarines. I can't even remember if we are still pretending it doesn't do that. Tricky D's use of anaconda malt liquor to shrink the black man's D. Well, up until Snowden, the most credible one was that the NSA was sucking up everyone's data and phone calls. Then there was the whole global financial cabal running the world. But the recent Endgame memo seems to have moved that one from conspiracy to reality. In the future, people who don't see conspiracies everywhere are going to look like the nutbags. Beyonce was never really pregnant. As often as this thread comes up, I still read it every time. MJ was castrated as a child. Todd is secretly trying to take over Walt's empire. That the prices that most American hospitals choose for the care they provide are arbitrary and have pretty much nothing to do with how much those things actually cost the hospital. It's credible because it's mostly true. Sources: here, and here, and here. The JFK assassination. If you watch the video, there is no way he was shot by LHO based on the direction of JFK's head jerk and the location of the building he was shot from. That Courtney Love hired someone to kill Kurt Cobain. That the entertainment industry wants to keep us downtrodden and sedate by constantly releasing movies about how money will not make you happy, so no one complains when we're all poor and unhappy. The mother of all conspiracy theories. The idea that all conspiracy theories are a mixture of truth and misinformation, some of which is released by the conspirators. The idea being to confuse the issues and to discredit theorists before they ever start. Ever drive down the expressway and see miles and miles of orange barricades barrel but no actual construction? I think the government does this to avoid spending money on a plot of property to store the barricades barrels while raising money due to increased speeding fines in work zones. That Timothy McVeigh had help from people still at large. Either A. The three-letter agencies, FBI, CIA, NSA, hold all of the real power in the US government, and our elected officials serve mostly at their whim, not necessarily owned by, but let's just say, highly influenced. Or B. The US is behind all of the current instability in the Middle East as well as possibly the Arab Spring. By overthrowing countries through proxy and then destabilizing them into sectarian violence, which then spreads to other countries, causing more unrest in places unaffected originally. The US has guaranteed that the Middle East will never form a stable power bloc for the foreseeable future and will be too caught up in sectarianism to notice all of the awful that the US is doing. Plus, it keeps oil prices predictably high but never reaching the too high mark where US consumers stop using as much. The fact that chip bags do not have Ziploc tops because chip companies want to make even more money. Think about it. They're able to sell chip clips and your chips become stale more quickly. The side effects of laws are the intended effects, and the stated effects are present only to preserve votes. The whole NSA brouhaha is a well choreographed distraction. While we freak out about the government reading our stupid emails, something really heinous is going down. Who knows? The real reason behind the governments, US and UK, fighting piracy so hard is because if a revolution were to happen it would be hackers that take down the government's communications that will really win the revolution. Through every anti-privacy law they put in certain clauses that would allow them to more actively fight hackers. Your right to arms will only do so much. What good is it if the government still has more firepower? Your right to hack and have an internet free of government watch and censorship will be the greater than your right to arms. That John McCain's campaign was behind the whole Obama birth certificate Kenya thing. Questions were starting to be asked about McCain's own eligibility, since he was born in Panama. He, himself, may not have been a natural born citizen. What better way than to cast doubt on the opponent by planting a couple of stories? Suddenly, the talk of McCain not being eligible disappeared, while the Obama thing exploded beyond the campaign's control. The NBA rigged the 1985 lottery to have the Knicks get Patrick Ewing. That this question makes the front page on Reddit all the time so that governments, corporations, and terrorists can know what we all really believe. Someone warped it out of Jason Russell's brain at the peak of his Connie 2012 campaign so we wouldn't have to go deal with Africa's endless problems. I have never been one to jump on the rave train for these types of campaigns, but I definitely found it unusual how quickly he went from a completely sane, mentally healthy individual to a completely crazed naked man in the streets. His breakdown was blamed on dehydration and a brief reactive psychosis. I'll say it was ducking brief. He is a completely normal person and the timing was extremely weird. In his words, again, it's really hard to explain if people who have never had an out-of-body experience. But it really wasn't me. That wasn't me. That person on the street corner ranting and raving and naked is not me. That's not who I am. Antivirus companies make viruses. I think that's possible. Mainly because every boy with medium-high computer skills can create viruses. Conspiracy theories are a conspiracy to distract people from the real conspiracies. The government rigged the 2009 NFC Championship game between the Vikings and the Saints. Source 1. Common sense. Source 2. I'm a Vikings fan. The CIA killed John F. Kennedy. Michael Hastings was murdered. Yelp blackmails small businesses for advertising money. Tire companies throw nails and screws on the highways. The actual people responsible for the Boston bombings were never found and fled state before the bombs even went off. The Boston Police Department and US government hired 2 scapegoats in order to save face. These 2 were given no affiliation to any country or organization that would warrant the public demanding retaliation from the US military. They were also given almost unpronounceable unspellable names to avoid people from talking about them or researching them and eventually just forget they even existed. This is one by my dad that I cannot easily dismiss. All of the famous people in the 60s were killed by the government. JFK, RFK, Marilyn Monroe, Hendrix, Morrison, MLK. The government thought that there was going to be a revolution, so they took out the major figureheads of what was the enemy culture. That antivirus software companies make viruses themselves, so you'll need to buy their product. Michael Hastings' death was not an accident. Someone tampered with his car. The World Trade Center being an inside job. CIA bringing drugs into minority communities as a means of keeping them in the lower class. Using the media as a means of control over the entire population. Something odd happened on TV 3 years ago. Reality shows are everywhere. Perhaps to keep us entertained with seemingly normal lives of others, while ignoring our own. It glamorizes the mundane life, keeping us complacent. I didn't have cable since 2008, and when I hooked it up last summer, I had no idea what I was watching and had never seen the concept of reality TV besides the real world. The Federal Reserve is an evil, private institution that is not federal and certainly has no reserves. It has been responsible for nearly every financial crisis in the United States for the past 100 years and serves the special interest groups at the expense of the rest of society. In regards to power, it is above the President, Senate, Congress, etc. Give me control of a nation's money and I care not who makes its laws. Osama Ranchal Boer Rothschild. That Obama ordered the Department of Homeland Security to purchase as much ammunition as it possibly could in order to get it out of private citizens' hands as a backdoor method of gun control. Corporations and banks are the kings of society. Wars are purely to make money. Debt, interest and money are modern day slavery. We do not live in a free society. I've always been into the theory about Denver International Airport's murals. Young Money is part of the Illuminati, as well as the majority of rap hip-hop moguls and major popular Clear Channel recording artists. And by that I mean all their wealth is just given to them, in hopes of driving up record sales and promoting a culture of wealth idolatry. You can't be poor and in the mainstream. That my Dalmatian didn't actually go to a farm in the country while I away at camp when I was 9. Princess Diana was very likely murdered. That conspirators ask this same question every 2 weeks on AskReddit to keep tabs on who knows what. UFOs, flying saucers, were a manufactured story to hide the secret WO2 spy plane test flights. Then the story got a life of its own and somehow people saw the test flights as cover up for UFOs instead of the other way around. Libya was destabilized and Gaddafi removed because he wanted to start selling their oil for gold. Libya had the highest standard of living in Africa. Gaddafi was well loved by most. The rebels' first act once in power was to establish a central bank and immediately put the country into debt. Why would they go and do that? Energy companies invent scary stories about monsters and home invasions and post them on Reddit to make people sleep with the lights on and increase profits. That large corporations often allow catastrophes to occur because they can be more profitable than prevention. That is, the BP oil spill. BP knew the failure was imminent, so Halliburton bought up the largest oil cleanup company and made a ton of money on the spill. This concept was the idea behind the show Rubicon. There are bits and pieces of the 9/11 conspiracy theories that I think might be credible. Namely, that North American Air Defense Forces actually did work that morning, and that the hostage uprising aboard Flight 93 was doomed. Whether it proved successful or not, N591 UA was shot down over Shanksville, as per the rules of engagement. But what government is going to admit to that during a period of national mourning? I think that there was a cover-up of some kind related to 9/11, but that it wasn't intended to hide government involvement or anything. I don't believe that Hitler died in Berlin in 1945. Argentina was basically a German colony. After the war, over $100 billion in Nazi loot flooded into the country before being siphoned back into Germany in the 50s. There is only one witness to Hitler dying in the bunker. There are a great deal of witnesses that claim he was in South America in later years. The FBI kept records on sittings until the 50s. Stalin never believed that he was dead. Given the chaos of the time, two superpowers clashing on two front lines, is it really that unlikely that a small group of people with the biggest private fortune ever amassed managed to slip through the net? We know he used body doubles, and since 2009 we know the skull the Russians had wasn't his. We also have good reason to believe that escaping and regrouping in Argentina was the plan should things go south for the Nazis. No one has full power. Some people have influence. But even then it doesn't always work. Everyone in charge has their own agenda and has carved their own niche to work with. They hate agreeing and cooperating with each other. And pretty much every law we've passed in the last 100 years was not their best work, but just a basic compromise to keep everyone alive while they go back into their holes and try and get what they want done. That the government posts these to find out what we know. The global terror threat that was issued for the month of August is all a ploy by the GVT to showcase the integrality of the NSA spy program in detecting terrorist activities before they occur, thus reducing support for Snowden. I mentioned this before. JFK assassination was a KGB and CIA plan set up to get him out of power. The story goes that after the hotline call between JFK and Gorbachev, another call was made in secret between LBJ and the Kremlin. They both decided that the way Kennedy was handling the Cuban Missile Crisis, that nuclear war was imminent, so they hatched a plan to remove him. Oswald was a patsy. He was approached by the KGB to be a sort of sleeper agent. He was promised a getaway and a new life in Russia. He was obviously double-crossed and the rest is history. The one thing about the conspiracy that's not commonly heard is how Robert Kennedy fits in. Basically, before his death, JFK confessed to his brother that he thought there was a plan to get him out of office. He didn't suspect murder though. After the assassination, Robert started looking into it and found evidence of a USSR and USA plan to kill JFK. Both countries could not risk the evidence being exposed, so they killed him. They never found what evidence he had, but it could still be around. This is why the files have been sealed for so long. Definitely 9/11. IDK who did it, or what the real story is, but I'm sure it's not what is being told. ATM. That the US knew of an impending Japanese attack and looked the other way to have an excuse to enter World War II. Iraq War II was about transitioning Iraq's oil deals back to US dollars from euros. As soon as the US captured the oil fields, notice the US forces took the north oil fields, while the other allied forces took the south. They switched it quietly back to trade in USD. Every major technological breakthrough comes from stranded time travelers. In fact, life came from time travelers. I imagine humanity one day develops time travel and the first thing we do is go back in time to see life form, but nothing is even happening, so the pissed off time traveler spits and thusly forms life. Or, time traveler finds himself in around 1850 and decides let's go meet Louis Pasteur just to find out Louis Pasteur doesn't exist and they become Louis Pasteur. Osama bin Laden did not have the power to delay NORAD's response to 4 hijacked airliners on 9/11, but somebody definitely delayed the response. I heard that the US government has been monitoring all of our electronic communication. Pretty much anyone if you listen to the right source explain it. My uncle is heavy involved in a social suppressive organization and he explained to me one year at Christmas some theories about current events. While he was talking I knew it was complete BS, but in the weeks that followed, it's all I thought about. Example, US was using our soldiers for population control. During the Gulf War, we sent our National Guard instead of our regular troops to the front lines, infected them, Gulf War syndrome, and returned them to mingle with everyday people in the US. Full-time soldiers would be stationed on bases and wouldn't be as effective. At the time, it scared the crap out of me. Over time, it seems like it was more of a paranoid, anti-war theory. Microsoft, Apple, Google software and services all hide NSA government backdoor access. The US purposely destabilizes the Middle East so they can't unite and destroy Israel. The market crash of 2007 was needed to devalue the 401ks of the baby boomers because there was not enough cash in the world to cover the inflated accounts Wall Street had pretended to create to get the American public to give 5% minus 15% of their earnings to the stock market. North Dakota. I don't know anyone from there and nobody says they've ever been there. It just seems pretty fishy that there would be a North Dakota.